Good morning and welcome to today's morning writing. I am your live stream accountability writing partner, Roaster Music, and I'm going to be working on getting things lined up for my Inkshares campaign for 31 Days of Narratemes, a guided journal for questing the crap out of your daily life, which I am seriously reconsidering altering the subtitle description to being a guided journal for questing the crap out of yourself, out of your daily self-care, rather than your daily life. You should, because that's what it is. You are questing crap away from your self-care practices and reaffirming that taking care of yourself so that you can do whatever it is that you want to do, get done whatever it is you want to get done, will get done. So I'm going to be working on that and hopefully also getting a jump on creating a guided visualization to go out on February 8th, which will pair well with the article on the little match girl, which we'll be publishing tomorrow on thegoldengooseeggs.com. The guided visualization would be shared for download in the Facebook group, The Golden Goose Eggs, which is bit.ly/thegoldenGooseEggs. And I'm just going to go ahead and jump into the live chat over here and get that primed so that if you want to let me know what you're working on and the progress you're making, you can do that and I will check back in with you. Specifically, I will most definitely be checking back in at about 10:15 to let you know that we've reached the halfway point of our morning writing, which goes from 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So 2.5 hours, meeting an hour and 15 minutes in between. Happy writing. It is now 10:18, and so we're a little past the halfway point in our morning writing today. And I have gone ahead and finished my campaign work this morning, and now I'm on to making a guided visualization. So I'm just going to pop in here in the live chat and see what's going on for a bit before getting back to it. All right. It is 11:25, which means it is time for our wrap up today. I'm going to start by going over what all was in the chat. This, as you know, is our morning writing from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. It is a time to be accountable to each other, to share what we're working on in the live chat. Trying not to be distracted by the chat. So I do have the YouTube video on my end as a tab while I'm working in Google Drive on another tab so that the chat does not distract me from my own writing. It does not appear from the chat today, which is busier than usual, which is good to see. It does not appear that anybody else was putting the chat in a separate window in order to have sort of just background noise while working. So what was going on in the chat here does also appear simply to be general questions. So I'll go ahead and answer those general questions. Jan Dlask, or Jan Dłask maybe, if it's Polish. Jan. Hi, do you play any sport or dance? I dance for fun. It is not attractive. I can kind of swing dance though. I've done musical theater, so I can follow some very basic choreography. Sports I was made to do by my parents as a kid to help try to make friends and just to give me something to do that was mine. They were always trying to help us find activities that would keep us active while also helping us to find our own space, my sisters and I. The friend finding part, the friend making part, the social skill building part was kind of hindered by the fact that all the sports teams readily available for me to join, given that we were growing up in a small town, meant that my teammates were always the kids I already knew, kids I went to school with, and was already having a lot of trouble getting along with. And I'm not the most coordinated person. So being on a sports team with kids that were already wary of my presence did not make that better. So that's my answer to that question. Lucian Pendragon says, good morning, Rose. I love you. Lucian, thank you. That is kind of you to say. I do not know you yet well enough to respond in kind, and I hope to do so in time. El Mustafa El Karez says, cool. Need inspiration? Anyway, good luck. All right, so he was anticipating that I was going to be active in the live chat, which, as I have just now stated a few minutes ago, is not the case during the morning writing. I am in another tab working on my morning writing, as I encourage you to be doing as well. Needing inspiration, I do not have that issue at the moment. I have a list of projects that I want to work on, as well as reminders as to what initially inspired those projects. That way, when I come back to them, I can rekindle the fire of that inspiration rather than just trying to jump into it and trying to force the project to happen in the way I originally envisioned it. You can see a little bit of that idea regarding working with inspiration in the article that will be going out on my website tomorrow, thegoldengooseeggs.com. The link to that site is in the info box below, and if you subscribe, you can have that article on Hans Christian Andersen's Little Match Girl sent right to your inbox tomorrow when that email goes out. And good luck to you as well, Mustafa. Someone who calls himself King asks why you quiet. I'm guessing, well, quate. Why you quate? I'm guessing that meant quiet. If you meant quiet during the writing in which I wasn't talking, that would be because the writing. And if you mean in terms of how I'm speaking, it's because not everyone is a morning person like me. I admit in the earlier videos, I was much perkier, much let's jump in and do this. And somebody mentioned in reaction to one of my 10-15 halfway point reminders that at that point I have a softer, more soothing voice. And that's something I do in the midst of the video in order to not disrupt anyone's writing too much, as I'm just reminding everyone that we're halfway through to 11:30. And after getting that comment, and it was meant purely as a compliment when he gave it, in terms of recommending that I create ASMR videos, which is on the list of possibilities. Not necessarily inspired to do that yet, but it's on the list of possibilities. And I decided that I would try to be that gentler, quieter voice when I start the video and during the reminder and at the conclusion, the wrap up, just to help keep everything with continuity, not to be too abrasive to anyone when we're first getting started, not to be too abrasive or disruptive when we're at the halfway point and people are working, and also at the end, gently bringing people out of the writing time and not being disruptive there again as we transition into the next part of our day. Shahin Shah said, writing about ? I had, before that comment come up, put in a hello again message reminding people that the live stream is for accountability purposes and requesting that people let me know in the chat what they were working on. Shahin Shah said, writing about ? So I don't know whether he meant what am I working on, or if he or she, it doesn't have a picture, so I don't know who the profile is for. I don't have a clue as to the preferred pronouns for this individual. I don't know if they were asking what I was writing about this morning. That would be further up in the chat, that I started out working on the Inkshares campaign for 31 Days of Narratemes, a guided journal for questing the crap out of your daily life, which I may change the subtitle to a guided journal for questing the crap out of your daily self-care, because that really is the focus of the questing going on in the guided journal. And the link to that project is in the info box below the videos. And they said, best of luck, also subscribed, then said, you writing about, oh yeah, that's what I was writing. Silly me, you're live now. Hello, it's nice to meet you. So that's what I was working on. I wanted to know, what are you perhaps working on? You can let me know in the chat box here since we're live. And you can also let me know what your preferred pronouns are. My own preferred pronouns are neighbor, neighbors, neighbor self. But as part of the my gender is neighbor philosophy, if you get my pronouns wrong, I'm not going to hold it against you. I understand that having been born female and clearly presenting in a very femme way, that it is very natural when people see me to associate that with to associate my presentation with the pronoun she and to use that. So, but that is part of my gender identity, is that if you're misusing my pronouns, it's not that big of a deal. Also, neighbor, neighbors, neighbor self, putting neighbor instead of in place of the she or in place of the her can be a little bit of a tongue twister when you're not used to it. So I am going to give you a little more time to possibly type in what it is you're writing about in the chat box there. It is pretty complex. It is. If you want to share what you were working on today in the morning writing, go ahead and do so. I'm going to, while you're typing, I'm going to go ahead and share what I worked on for the rest of the time after I finished working on my Inkshares campaign for the morning. After the Inkshares campaign for the morning, I worked on creating a guided visualization, which will be a complement to the article about the little match girl that will be published tomorrow on the goldengooseeggs.com. It's night where you are. That is very totally understandable. So were you doing nighttime writing, or was this just something to have in the background? What in particular brought you to engaging in our morning writing live chat? After I worked on the Inkshares campaign this morning, I went and started work on the guided visualization, which will complement the Little Match Girl article that will be going out tomorrow on thegoldengooseggs.com. The guided visualization the aim is to share that in the Facebook group, which is linked below, bit.ly/thegoldengooseggs, where I also share every 4 days journaling prompts on various topics of bringing fairy tale principles into your daily living, with the principles specifically of fairy tale living, everyday magic, happily ever out there, depthlessness, intuitive logic, and the sublime. And yeah, so I took a lot of notes on what is required to make a good guided visualization, on how I want just basic note taking from an inspiration resource that I have. Just taking the notes again to help, encourage that spark again. Even though I already know the information on how to make a guided visualization, rewriting down the notes by hand helps to sort of nurture that spark and get it going again. And so I did that. And then the last bit of typing I was doing was actually to just make a preliminary outline of what the guided visualization, the 3 matches, is going to be. Just found your channel on random. I never met a writer in person. I was also observing your approach to writing atmosphere, etc. Very cool. Well, thank you very much for observing and for hanging out with me. It is very helpful to know that there are people somewhere who from time to time are checking in and holding me accountable, because that's why I started this, was to be able to hold myself accountable and to also be an accountability partner to other people who might have something to work on. I am here every day from 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'm not entirely sure. You said it's night, so I'm not sure what exact time zone you're in and how to calculate when those 2.5 hours are occurring for you. But I am here every day doing this. This is day 19 of a 100-day writing schedule that I have for the Inkshares project, linked below. And yes, you already said that you subscribed to my channel. Thank you very much for that. You can also subscribe to the email list for thegoldengooseggs.com by visiting that website link below. You can also join the Facebook group to get the journaling prompts, bit.ly/thegoldengooseggs. Again, that is below. And if you're interested in just any of the other writing I've done, there's a link below. It's 10:08 p.m. All right. Gotcha. So that's 10:08 on a Sunday, or 10:08 on a Saturday? Are you ahead of me or behind me? I just want to double check that before I try to throw any math at you, because I will do the math for you. I'm a big fan of math, but Sunday or Saturday? Yes, so there's all sorts of places to subscribe below. for all the accountability things and all the projects. And the link below, better-storytelling.com, which the top portion of it with regards to current quests, current projects, needs to be updated. But when you scroll down to the section, publications and performances, I believe I've named that section. Sunday, so you're ahead of me. Gotcha. All right. Better-storytelling.com, the publications and performances section, there are various items that link to other writings that I've done that are published on the internet, the epic pantoum that I've written, the Penrose Trekkie where I write Star Trek sonnets, various wonder tales that I've had published with Exterminating Angel Press, the magazine, which is an online journal. And now, as part of the wrap up, I will do some time zone math. All right, so you said 10:08 when my clock said about 11:38. Oh, I've gotten rambly today. All right, so from 11:38 to 10:08, that is 1.5 hours more, 1.5 hours less than a 12-hour period, which means there is a 10.5 time difference. So from your time to mine, minus 10.5 hours. From my time to yours, that's plus 10.5 hours. All right, so 11:30 should go to 10 p.m. and that would mean 10 p.m. and 2.5 hours before 10 p.m. is 7:30. So for you, that would be, for you, I'm here 7:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Sorry about the E missing on here there. My letters on my keyboard are starting to die. So that's something that needs to be figured out at some point, how I'm going to continue living with that. But for now, I have the rest of my day to get to. You should probably at some point get some sleep. I don't know when your bedtime is. I've been getting myself into bed at 9 lately. I've just been going to sleep earlier because I want to enjoy my mornings more. So, and it's harder to wake up when I want to wake up in winter because the things that the sun does. I'll leave it at that because it is now 11:43 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I heard that writing your imaginations into paper is the most painful thing a writer undergoes. It can be. It depends on a number of factors. Number one being your relationship with your imagination. What I write about, okay. In her recent book, Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert describes that there are 2 contracts you can make with inspiration, aka your imagination. You can make the suffering artist contract where you get drunk and make yourself miserable. Or you can have the contract of a partnership where you're going to do the work and you're not going to torture yourself about the work. It's really the pain part of being a writer is is how much pain you give yourself while you're doing the work. Oscar Kenway has asked, what are you writing? During the 2.5 hours that I was writing, first I worked on my Inkshares project, 31 Days of Narratemes, a guided journal for questing the crap out of your daily life. Alternately, a guided journal for questing the crap out of your daily self-care. And the link to that is below. Then I worked on a guided visualization inspired by Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Match Girl. An article about the Little Match Girl, about the Little Match Girl will be going out on my website tomorrow. So the link for that website, thegoldengooseeggs.com, is below. If you go to that site and subscribe to the email list, then tomorrow the article will get sent right to your inbox. And so the second portion of the writing time today, I spent, or the bulk of the writing time today, I spent working on a guided visualization that will be complementary to that article, and that will be released in 11 days from today. So that is that. But to get back to that question of getting your imagination onto paper being the most painful thing a writer undergoes, that's really about how you approach the work. There are writers like Hemingway who say writing is very easy. You sit at the typewriter and bleed. Hemingway was a suffering artist type writer. He got drunk. He made himself very depressed. He isolated himself from people. He wasn't great at relationships. And then he reached a point where, you know, he shot himself. Not like that. People who say that that's the most painful thing about being a writer is the writing. Why are you doing that to yourselves? That is the question Elizabeth Gilbert asks in her recent book, Big Magic. And she talks about, you know, having an alternative contract with nature where you show up and you do the work, and when ideas come, you just put them to paper because you've built up that muscle memory. And it is something that I talk about at a slant in the guided journal that I'm working on. In the guided journal and in my most recent article on the Golden Goose Eggs, plus a live workshop that's in the Goose Eggs Facebook group right now, I talked about having a more peaceful relationship with fear. A lot of people talk about fear, or that feeling of resistance, that feeling of the pain that comes with doing anything creative or doing anything with your imagination. It's something you have to push through. It's something you have to punch in the face. But the problem with that is that feeling of resistance, that feeling of fear, that feeling of discomfort is your subconscious signaling to you that you're headed into uncharted territory. And you don't need to punch your subconscious in the face. Number one, you don't need to punch your subconscious in the face for doing its job and just signaling to you, hey, this is new and I don't know how I feel about this. In mind, it's pretty simple, but writing it into a paper, everything that I feel like it needs more work, needs to be more precise, goes on till you fill out of papers. So you're talking about the disconnect The difficulty you're talking about is the disconnect between how you envision things going on in your mind and replicating that perfectly on paper. The fact that you're running out of papers, I'm going to say, is a good sign that you're on the right track. You're headed in the right direction at the very least, because running out of papers means that wanting what's in your head to be replicated perfectly on the paper, that perfection isn't stopping you from starting, because true perfectionism won't even let you put something on paper unless you can put it on paper perfectly from the very beginning. So you replicating what's like, just attempting to replicate what's going on in your mind is great and wonderful. The fact that you're willing to do that and willing to use so much paper to do that. That's step number one, is getting over the hurdle of giving yourself permission to just start. So great, well done. The thing about trying to replicate perfectly what's going on in your mind, the difficulty with that is that the mind does not actually work in a linear way. When you write, what is on paper needs to be linear. And when you're thinking about a thing, your thoughts are not linear. You're thinking about all these different elements, all these different pieces of the puzzle at the same time. It's just so fast. It seems instantaneous and everything's jumbled around, and you can feel the logic of it because your mind created it. But your mind is everything in your mind is completely interrelated. Everything's just all the time. If you look at scans of brain activity, the way the electricity buzzing through your brain, it flows out in a cloud. It's not moving. It's not like a connect to the dots situation where it's bouncing from one area to the next. It's a cloud it's an electrical storm of all these different things going on at different times in seemingly random ways. And that is, the next step of the journey is accepting that your brain, you consciously think as you're writing, that because you're writing it, and the fact that you can put some of what you're thinking down on paper in a logical, linear way, you trick yourself as you're writing into thinking that your subconscious and the way you naturally visualize things is also working in a logical, linear way. And it isn't. So there's this acceptance that needs to happen that your brain isn't doing things linearly. You are trying to put into a linear composition a thing that in its current perfect state in your brain is itself non-linear. So your next step is accepting that. And the third step is figuring out, then, do you train yourself? Do you just practice visualizing through the story, visualizing through the work again and again and again, till in your mind it is linear and it is logical, and then put it on paper? Because in the mind, it's now in a form that fits on the paper. Or do you just write it? Just write it as best you can and let it pick its form as you go, and let its form change as you work with the idea. So there's giving yourself permission to work is step one. Step two is accepting that your brain is not actually working in a linear fashion. You can describe what your brain is doing in a linear fashion, but that does not mean what it's doing is going on in a linear fashion. And then step three is a decision between, do I start practicing focusing my thoughts to, refine and refine and refine the thoughts so that they become linear, so I can write it clearly with as little paper as possible? Or do I continue down the continuing to write and continuing to work with it path, and allowing the idea as I'm working with it to take on its ultimate form And a way to save paper with that, of course, is to work on a computer, to work using voice memos, all sorts of little technological things you can do to avoid using paper. But those are the two ways to work. And in either way, are you writing in prose or are you writing in verse? So is it fiction, nonfiction, poetry, or not poetry? Can you let me know? Because that'll be my next bit of advice, is exactly how to help your brain start organizing things. And I see now that you have logged off. So you're not going to be able to answer that question and let me know what's going on. So I don't know if that's a tech glitch or what. But if you're writing in a particular form, in case you come back to this video, if you're writing in a particular form, when you're deciding, when you're trying to figure out, how to guide your thoughts into a logical pattern so that you can more logically write it down, or you're continuing with the free writing and editing and just going over everything, and everything in your mind is shifting the whole time you're writing it. So then as you're writing it, it's continuously shifting until it finds its form. My number one piece of advice for anyone who may come to watch this is that with that sort of constant changing form, in order to help your mind recognize form, in order to create something along a form, or to help yourself recognize form so that as you're working on something, you can recognize, oh, this is the shape that it's taking, so I'll now maneuver my work to working in the shape, is to read about whatever your most general form is: fiction, nonfiction, poetry, non-poetry, though in my opinion, everything's poetry. And to just read about form. Read about, just a second. I'm going to show you something. All right. My next project is going to be a memoir. And I have here lists of different literary forms that I'm going to be borrowing from as I write my memoir. Number one is the abecadło, a Polish literary genre where a writer writes all these different pieces about a particular topic, titles them, each little piece, whether it's an essay, a character study, a personality sketch of someone that you knew or followed online, just random thoughts, lyric essays, anything. You write all these different little pieces, compile them in a book, and you arrange them alphabetically. Usually in Poland, writers do these at the end of their careers. I figure if I make it for a chapter of my life, it'll be kind of more exemplary of where my head was at, and it feels more conversational, personable. Then also, as I'm working on the memoir and thinking about the different pieces that go into it, I have here a list of common traits of novellas. I believe I got this out of an issue of Writer's Chronicle. Also out of Writer's Chronicle came these three keys to epistolary storytelling, which is where you're writing letters as a way of moving a story along. So if I wanted to write letters and have those in the alphabet book, I wanted to have, solid guidelines there. And then an imagist approach to the lyric essay. Actually, I think I got all three of these. Yeah, I got all three of these from Writer's Chronicle. Not the same issues. 2 issues, because I only own 2. But yeah, an imagist approach to the lyric essay. So you're taking 3 rules of imagist poetry and applying it to essay writing. And so those are things that I was looking at because the Abbotsford can be such an open form. And then, of course, you have just any book that teaches you how to write, like just that gives you the guidelines, and you read the guidelines, and any stories that those guidelines recommend as examples, you read those, and then you reread the guidelines. And maybe after each story, maybe after you've read all the stories or all the poems, depending on what sort of guidelines you're looking at. And you just sort of teach your brain to recognize the form, and then you can start practicing working in the form and getting your brain used to thinking in terms of the form, or you can just continue recognizing the form and doing the writing that you're doing so that you can then recognize what your writing is turning into and then help refine it into that final form. Yeah, and now it is 12 o'clock. It is well past the usual end time for our time together. And it was fun answering questions at the end. That was fun. But now I have work to do, specifically baking, because I have an event to go to tonight. A friend of mine is hosting a dinner, and I want to be a good neighbor and bring a thing. So there is that. Enjoy the rest of your day. Good journey, my friends. Till tomorrow.